No problem. Okay, so today's class I think is kind of interesting. At least I found it interesting when I was preparing it. So in the next section of her book, Heller, I can never tell, and I think part of the reason, I've noticed in the past couple of weeks that I've been mostly straight lecturing rather than engaging in conversation, and we should probably allow for just more discussion in the class. It's more interesting that way, I think, right? But there's just so much material. I don't know. Maybe we'll do it at the end. Yeah, maybe we'll do it at the end. So what basically should be writing down or remembering questions that we can discuss maybe afterwards. But anyway, in this next section, we're almost done with her book. We're gonna have, this class is going to be discussing halacha generally, like what is the philosophy behind halacha, and how does that affect men and women's different areas of halacha. So that's a really kind of interesting thing. And then, how does it affect the difference in men and women's different modes of, different mitzvos? Men and women have different mitzvos, a few, not many at all, but a few. And how does the whole way, what is, in other words, the philosophy behind halacha, the purpose of halacha, the sort of ideas of what does law do for us? And that's going to answer the question of how it affects men and women differently. So that'll be this class. And then the last class on her book will be focusing on, I'm going to skip a couple of aspects because I think I want to devote one whole class to, or maybe several classes to, women's special mitzvos. You know, women have 3 special mitzvos that are their special mitzvos: taking challah, lighting Shabbos candles, and taras mishpacha mikvah. So I'm going to skip that part, but that she does talk about a very interesting section on women and Torah study. So we're going to do women and Torah study, and then she has a chapter on marriage that she has a lot of interesting points on, and that'll finish us off on the Heller book. And then after that, we're going to go to the topic you requested, which is women rabbis and the new position for women called yohatzot, or rabat or rabbanot, something like that. We'll discuss that.
I don't remember. It sounds interesting.
You asked me about a class on women rabbis. Now you don't want it? Okay, fine. I won't do it. No, I know.
I talked to you about the divorce thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, we did a class on divorce, but we can revisit it if you want. Right? Aguna, the issue of aguna.
Yeah.
Agunot. Yeah, so we did a class on that, but I'll be happy to revisit it. And maybe it could be a one-on-one class. It's whatever. But we'll do rabbis first. Women rabbis first, and the whole issue, and that probably will take us to Purim, and then we'll have to have a little hiatus, especially this year, because there's a lot going on, right. And then we'll come back after Pesach, and then we'll pick it up again. I don't want to have a lag, and I don't want to have too much of a break. I really don't, and it's a lot of work, this class, but it's very rewarding for me personally. So I can't speak to you. Okay. Okay. All right. So. Again, so we're talking about now the perception that Judaism restricts women in halacha, right? In the world of mitzvahs, that halacha was somehow set up to exclude women. So again, it bears reminding ourselves that what are we talking about when we talk about exclusions? Out of 613 mitzvahs, that, by the way, not every person can fulfill, because there are certain mitzvos for certain people only. There are mitzvos of the 613 that are only intended for judges. There are certain mitzvos only intended for kings. Certain mitzvos only intended for priests, etc., etc. There's a certain mitzvah, a woman has the mitzvah of mikvah, that's one of the 613. A man doesn't have that same mitzvah, right? So again, not everybody can perform all 613 mitzvahs, but of the ones that men can do, women can. Negative commandments we're all required to do, but of the positive commandments that are set aside for most men, There are about 14 that a woman is either exempt from, or she cannot do, or she's discouraged from doing. These are saying Shema twice a day, learning and teaching Torah, putting tefillin on her head, putting tefillin on her arm, circumcising her son, the priestly blessings, saying the priestly blessings, counting the Omer, taking the lulav, shofar. Counting the Omer are not required. It's not required for women. They're exempt from that. Women are
discouraged.
Not discouraged, and that's not one of the ones they're discouraged from. Not one of the ones they're discouraged from. Women are exempted from most, and there's always a couple of exceptions. Okay, like Shabbos is an exception. Women are exempt from most of the time-bound positive commandments, meaning things you have to do at a certain time. So Omer is a certain time, only during the Omer. Shofar is only a certain time. Rosh Hashanah is when you hear the shofar. Men are required to hear. Women are not from the Torah required to hear the shofar. That's right. So we're going to talk later about why it is that everybody does it now. Okay, we'll talk later. Yeah.
There's a couple times when they read certain parts of the Torah, and are those phrases or passages, are those requirements too? You know what I'm talking about? Like, so there's one they read right before.
Oh, Pasha Zachar?
Pasha Zachar. And
Yeah.
then I think is there another one? Do you know if those are included?
Like Megillah? Did you have that in mind? Because Megillah, like listening to the Megillah, is a requirement for everybody. Okay. And the reason that it's a requirement for women too. Twice, yeah.
Twice,
yeah.
Right, okay.
But Megillah is not one of the 613
right.
because it came later. Obviously, it was dependent on the whole episode. That's okay. Well, right. I'm talking about the 613 mitzvos, okay. Whereas you're referring to later halacha and law. Okay. Like, later. Okay, yeah, no, that's okay. That's all right. Yeah. But yes, there are a couple of exceptions to that. I mentioned Shabbos. Shabbos is a very time-bound mitzvah, but women have to hear Kiddush, for example. That's also not one of the 613 mitzvos. It's not listed in the Torah, but hearing Kiddush specifically. But that is a halacha that is required of women as well. And so there are a couple of exceptions to the rule. Now, of the ones that I mentioned here, I think I covered them all. Procreation, she's not required to have children. A man is. All right. Yeah, that's a good one. We'll talk about that a little later. Right, it was reading Shema, learning, teaching Torah, tefillin, tzitzis, writing a Torah, sukkah, sitting in the sukkah, lulav, shofar, procreation, circumcising your son, and making one's wife happy during the first year of marriage. Again, she's not a man, so it doesn't apply to her. Okay, so of these, she can't, like I said, there's certain ones here she can't do because she's not a man. You're making your wife happy is an example. Ones that are gender neutral, she can do 6. In other words, she can read Shema twice a day. She can learn and teach Torah. She can count the Omer. She can take lulav. She can hear shofar. Right, all of this. She can she can go in the sukkah. She can procreate. So that's also, if she wants to do it, she can do it. She's only discouraged from really 4 of them: tefillin, tzitzis, writing a Torah. And that's about it. Circumcision, she can't really do. It's really but that's it.
But
so,
Moshe's wife did.
Huh?
Moshe's wife did.
Right, she did, and she was allowed to do it. But she's, so Tziporah, that was her name. Why was she, yeah, so, right, she's not required to do it, and generally we say that the truth of the matter is, strictly speaking, a woman is allowed to be. It's the question of a woman doing circumcision is a different question, but the mitzvah is to circumcise your son, right? So that is incumbent upon the father. Now, in her case, Moshe didn't do it. That for the reasons we're not going to get into now. So she had to take it upon herself to do it, but it's not. It's something that, again, applies to the father. It doesn't apply to her. In other words, it's a mitzvah for the father. Okay. So, by the way, so now Heller makes a little side note here. She makes a point of saying that there are exceptions to every rule when it comes to halacha. What does that mean? So, in other words, no person is completely male or female. Everybody's got testosterone and estrogen, right? And so therefore it is possible, for example, in scientifically speaking, that a woman, particular woman, is going to be, let's say, hairier than a man, but doesn't negate the rule that most men are hairier than most women, or that most men run faster than most women, even though there may be a woman who's faster than a man, right? So the exception doesn't negate the rule. It sort of proves the rule, right? Now, when it comes to Jewish law, what this means is a woman may want to say, well, the rule doesn't apply to me because I'm not a typical woman. But that doesn't negate the fact that when the halachos were set up, or when in the case of halacha that was set up by the rabbis, or certainly in the case of mitzvos, we should understand that the law is presupposing a sex difference that's universal. Universal, again, with exceptions, but universal. But Heller says, you know what? If there is a woman that feels that her nature is an exception to the rule, and she considers that, she's different in some way, she should not feel obligated to, because she feels constrained by the social, let's say, view of what her role is as a wife or mother. If she doesn't feel like she wants to mold herself into a certain image, right, at the expense of expressing who she is, and she doesn't have to, within the confines of halacha. What this means is, and here's an example I'm using, for example, a woman who really abhors the idea of being a mother, right? So the halacha doesn't say she has to be a mother. As I said, she does not have the mitzvah to procreate. A husband does. A man does. If she really doesn't want to procreate, she doesn't have to get married and be a mother. That's within the confines of halacha. It's if it would be different if it was her mitzvah, but it's not. Okay, so she's not violating Judaism. There may be social pressures on her to marry. Her mother's going to give her a hard time. Let's face it. But she's not violating Jewish law if she doesn't want to fit into that mold, and that's fine. Okay, so next question. So how do we understand Jewish law as encouraging men and women along their biological strengths? So to answer that question, we have to answer the question, what is the function of Jewish law? All right. To answer that question, we have to really understand what is the function of law in general. What's the function of, say, secular law? Okay. So the assumption of secular law, all secular law in society, is that society has its own way of doing things, and each individual has their own way of doing something. I'm on my road, I'm on my path in life, and the law is there to protect me from other people who want to get in my way, right? In other words, the law is protecting my property and my life and other people from hurting me or hurting my property or taking my property or doing me harm, right? So it's stopping someone else who wants to stop me on my path. But I'm going on my path, right? I'm going here, and the law says we're going to just protect you on your road, whatever that road is. In Judaism, however, the law is the path. Halacha actually means path. That's what the word means. It means the way to walk as well as the ability to find that way. So we have a different idea of the purpose of law, okay? In secular society, you also have laws that are really only negative. That's another difference, right? We have in Judaism, we have positive laws, meaning I must do these things. In secular law, we don't have that idea. For example, there's no law that says I must go on green. Yeah, there's a more general law that says I can't obstruct traffic, but there's nothing forcing me, there's nothing explicitly, let's say, that says go on green. It's don't go on red. That's the law. Don't do this. Don't drive into the other person's lane at this and this time. Don't cross the double yellow line, right? So again, the idea is that where you want to go is up to you. You're going on your way, and the law is there to stop other people from getting in your way, okay? So the purpose of the law in Judaism is not that. The purpose of the law in Judaism is to help us express our godliness to the fullest extent. Okay, so the laws are there to help that aspect of godliness in us be more expressible. Okay, and the negative, those are the positive laws in Judaism. The negative laws do the same thing, but in a negative way. They suppress or repress my ability for self-diminishment. Okay, they suppress my ability to let the worst come out. All right, the best has to come out. So they also will affect areas of law that secular law doesn't. And so therefore halacha is going to be structured differently from secular law. Now, they do share something. They do share a couple of things. They're both repressive. Both law, all law is somehow repressive. What do I mean? Why? Why is all law repressive? Because there's no reason to make a law that everybody's going to follow by their natures, right? There's no reason to make that law. So, the assumption behind any law is that people are dualistic. They really want to be good. They want laws. They want a way of doing things. But we have our worser natures, and we have our Yetzer Hara, and that's going to influence us to do bad. So, for example, if you ask most people, should we have traffic laws? They'll say, well, yeah, sure, we absolutely need traffic laws. But on the other hand, I don't think there's a person alive that has not violated a traffic law, including yours truly. So hopefully that will. So we're dualistic. We're conflicted. We want to follow the laws, but on the other hand, sometimes it's just a little hard, So the laws are going to be repressive in some way, right? So it's Jewish law as well, right? Jewish law means it's going to stop me from doing what I want to do. There's going to be times that I wish I could use my phone on Shabbos, let's say, and the law is repressing me, right? Okay, so all law is repressive. The question is for what end? They're both going to hold me back from doing something I want to do. And again, the secular law represses me for protecting the other person, right? I want to steal your stuff, but that would be affecting you. Any externality, anytime I want to act that has an externality, an external effect on someone else, that's where the law is going to step in and say, wait a minute, let's see what you're doing and why. Okay, so in halacha, it's repressing my worst instincts over my own self, right? In order that I should be able to better myself. Now, so they also share something else, which is that repressive law, which means all law, is actually freeing. So what do I mean by this? And on the surface, it doesn't make much sense to say law is freeing. But, and I'm not talking about excessive, government overregulation, nanny state kind of thing of the minutia of our lives. I'm talking about basics of the law. So what do I mean by it's freeing? So you might think, logically, the most freeing thing is to say there should be no laws. No laws means I'm absolutely free to do exactly what I want, right? But what results from that? So let's take our metaphor of the traffic laws. So if I have no traffic laws, what does that mean? It means I can drive wherever I want, whenever I want, however I want, which is, in one sense, free. However, if I don't have any laws, so in other words, I can go anywhere I want. It means the other guy can also go anywhere he wants. So there's no laws about how fast to go, how slow to go, where to drive, when to stop, when not to stop. So what this actually means is that when I'm driving, I'm in a constant state of anxiety, right? And unease. I'm always thinking, what is the other guy going to do? Yeah, yeah, no problem. So, that's not freeing. That's very restrictive. The traffic laws actually free me up to drive with a certain level of confidence and ease and serenity. Should I pause?
So we didn't have to do that.
But it's like the metaphor I gave you a couple weeks ago. You go to the doctor and your husband goes to the doctor. And the doctor says, you guys really need some exercise. Okay, so, you are, Lisa, you're in okay shape, but you really need to get a little bit more exercise. So I'm going to prescribe an hour of exercise daily for you. Mm-hmm. Now your husband, Billy, however, you really have some flab there and some love handles. I need you to do 2 hours every day. Mm-hmm. So are you going to complain to the doctor? Hey, it's not fair. He has more things that he needs to do to get to a certain level of health. You don't complain about it. That's exactly
But he's not praying in the morning. Thank you for not making me Lisa.
Okay, but
she only has
but
1 hour.
okay, it's true. If he was on, but if he was honest with himself, he might think about the fact that the fact that the doctor is giving me more exercise means that I have a better opportunity. I have more minutes that I can spend in improving myself. I know it's a kind of a roundabout way of saying something, but it's like it's basically an acknowledge. It would be like an acknowledgement to the doctor, to himself, towards the doctor, that the doctor knows I need more, and thank you, doctor, for giving me what I need in order to get to Lisa's level, so that I can be on that level. Because we are told that the reason that women don't have as many mitzvos, and again, you're talking about just a handful, is because they can achieve that same level with less work. That's, in this case, spiritual level. In the doctor's, in the case of exercise, health level. So,
But I'm not buying it, because why wouldn't he say, thank you for, I don't know.
Thank you for helping me,
No,
but I wish I didn't.
he still
need
would want to be, he still would
so
want
we
to
want
have
the
the hour
ease,
workout.
right? He would want the ease of
Right. So
Right.
If his goal, if he's saying like,
But what it is he's saying, I recognize there's a lack in me, and therefore, because I'm on a lower level, let's say, than Lisa in terms of health,
right,
I am grateful for the opportunities to get to the level that I can using the extra hour of
but
exercise.
if we're saying that women are on a higher level,
We're not saying they're at a higher level. We're saying that they have a better ease at achieving the spiritual goals. That's all.
Okay.
You can't say they're at a higher level.
Okay.
That would not be fair. But we have a certain ease that allows us to, let's say, when it comes to...
So back to what you just said, wouldn't men want the ease? Instead, they make it a point to say, thank you for not making it easy for me.
Well, if we're
giving
thinking...
me that extra hour of exercise.
Right.
Like,
Because if we're looking at the brachos as thanking God for things, thanking Him for health, and thanking because you take away blindness and you help a crooked man walk straight, etc., etc. So I'm thanking. Then I'm going into a series of three brachos, thanking Him for mitzvos. Thank you for more mitzvos than a non-Jew. Thank you for more mitzvos than a guy than a slave. Thank you for more mitzvos than a woman. So again, yes, he could. The whole point is to thank God for what He gives us. So, in other words,
so it's not
to turn it
comparative.
around.
It's not really comparative. It's just saying, this is what I have, so thank you.
Right. In other words, you're basically saying, why doesn't it turn around to go to say, God, why didn't you make me like a woman? In other words, what you're saying is the man should say, gee, why couldn't you make me more on this level? We're not that's the point of the day of the morning brachos, is to thank. So if we
What do women say?
thank you for making me according to your will. We had a class on this, but we can
Yeah.
revisit the topic if you like.
Obviously. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay, no problem. What?
Yeah, I agree. We need to revisit.
Okay, all right, I'll write that down. Okay, so back to the topic. Okay, so right. Okay, so we discussed that. We went a little bit backwards there. Okay, right. So we're talking about how laws are actually freeing, because if I don't think you were here. This is part of the conversation. If I have no laws, no traffic laws at all, for example, then I'm driving in a constant state of fear and anxiety, and that's not freeing. So the laws actually free me up to drive with a certain level of ease and confidence and serenity, knowing that the guy in the next lane is not going to suddenly drive over to my side of the road. Okay. Jewish law, even seemingly repressive negative laws, are very similarly freeing. I'll give you an example. It occurred to me, it happened, I don't know why I was thinking about this, but I was thinking about Rosh Chodesh. Now, Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of every new month, is a holiday for women, a special holiday, and it's a reward for us not participating in the Chet Egel, the sin of the golden calf, right? So we were gifted with that holiday. It's a small holiday, which means that we are supposed to do something nice for ourselves. My sister, for example, used to go to Starbucks and get herself, when they were still kosher, I don't know if it's still kosher anymore, get herself like a fancy, either a culotta or something, like something nice like that. And it's also, we are restricted from doing certain kinds of housework, like sewing is one of them. So, yeah. Now, imagine, okay, I'm going about my day, and on Mondays I always take a basket of darning with me and sit down in the evening and I do my sewing. And I sit down and then I'm about to start sewing and I realize, it's Rosh Chodesh. I can't do my sewing. And it's a little bit of a burden to me because I wanted to do my sewing and I can't do it. So it's a little bit repressive. But it's an enforced holiday. So on the one side, it's repressive. It's limiting because I want to do what I wanted to do, and now I can't. But on the other hand, it's forcing me into a holiday. So it's forcing me to take a vacation, and that the vacation is ultimately for my good. It's ultimately freeing, even though, it's not. Or you can think about Shabbos in the same way, right? There's so many repressive laws about Shabbos. I can't talk on the phone. I can't drive. I can't cook. I can't turn on the lights. I can't turn on my internet. Nothing is so repressive, right? On the one hand, but on the other hand, what it frees us up to do is that it frees that part of myself that Shabbos is trying to reach. It frees my soul to connect to the godliness of the world in a way that I wouldn't choose to do if I had just a day off, right? If I have a day off from work, what?
Like Sunday.
Exactly. Sunday, if you were told, okay, Shabbos is going to be your day to reconnect to Hashem, do whatever you want, it would never happen. It just would never happen. So on the one hand, they're repressive, but on the other hand, it's freeing that part of me that benefits from Shabbos, the holy part of me, my soul, to reach that certain level of spirituality that I wouldn't ordinarily get. That's the point. Okay. So again, where they differ is the end goal. Secular law represses my influence over others. Jewish law represses my worst instincts over myself. Now, the Torah's take on law is where pressure is appropriate. Halacha acts to repress any element that deny our self-development. Another way of saying this is like this. Now, we're going to focus more on women and men now. So another way of saying is that any role definition that you take on for the purpose of self-fulfillment is going to necessarily be restrictive, right? Because any framework in which you define yourself is going to be leaving out other frameworks. For example, if I identify as a chef, right, by definition, that means I'm not a kindergarten teacher and I'm not a policeman, right? So I'm limiting myself. You could say, okay, I have limits, but I identify as this, right? So by definition, you're restricting yourself from all other professions. Furthermore, if you accept the definition and the value of your self-definition, so if I value myself as a chef, right, that means I'm going to accept certain limitations and certain repressive elements that allow me to fulfill that role. For example, one of the things I understand, if I'm a chef, it means that I understand that I have to spend 11 hours a day in the kitchen to really perfect my trade. I have to really work at it. It also might mean that I develop calluses on my knife hand, right? It means that I don't have time for anything else. If I value my identity as a chef, it also means, for example, if I believe that the chef's highest goal is to make great food for people to enjoy, well, it might mean I have to give up a family meal with my family because chefs work in the evening, in the supper time. Or it might even mean that I don't get a chance to eat the best food in the world because I'm busy making it for other people. So there's going to be limitations in your role, whatever role that is, but you understand that it's a trade-off, right? I'm trading, some side benefits for the role that I value because it has value to me and I identify in that role. So how does that apply to men and women's mitzvos? So if I'm a woman, right, by definition, I'm not a man. if I identify as a woman and I value what the Torah tells me I should value about being a woman. So I have a specific framework of identity and self-actualization role or pathway to that, right? So if I accept that there are different talents that I have, I'm not going to be so upset that I'm not doing those jobs, because I have my own jobs that are special and that are unique to me as a woman, right? So if the Torah believes there are pathways for self-expression for both men and women, so there are going to be repressive laws for this end, right? Again, the goal of the repressive law is to express something unique to me. And the same thing with positive laws, right? Those positive laws are going to encourage certain aspects of myself, right? So, but if I value the difference and my distinct identity, it's not going to bother me so much. It shouldn't, and that's how it should be viewed. It shouldn't bother you so much, the different, restrictions from these areas, if I know that focusing on my, gifts is going to lead me in the same direction as the other person. The ultimate goal is, of course, to connect to God and to live a fulfilled spiritual life, right? So we have positive laws and negative laws that help us self-actualize. The negative commandments we're all required to follow, everybody, men and women. And again, the purpose of negative commandments to prevent a person from making choices that block his access to his better self. And the positive commandments also designed to provide conduits to being the best person I can be. And they relate to the capacities and strengths in each person. And here you see, for example, that's why there are specific mitzvahs in the Torah for specific people. For example, a king has a specific law, has a specific mitzvah, one of the 613, that he has to carry Torah everywhere he goes. So what's the point of that law for his particular personhood or his particular role? Any ideas? Why would a king be required to carry a Torah with him wherever he goes? And we're talking about a king, in other words, the king of Israel, King David, King Shlomo. Why do you think a king might have that mitzvah?
Well, he's like a judge. He's making, law, enforcing law, and he needs to be aware of his responsibilities in the Torah of making proper laws. That's what I would say.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, so I guess we're very far from the idea of kingship.
Property or something?
Property? What do you mean?
Like this holy property because he's king. I don't know. Like holding on to what's sacred. I don't know.
You're getting close there. You're getting there. So we're very far from the idea of kingship. So it's kind of maybe hard to understand. But if you're a king, imagine yourself as a king. Yeah, that's the most powerful role in the nation. That's the most powerful role physically in the nation, not necessarily spiritually. That might be the job of let's say, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. But you definitely have lots of power. You have lots of money. You have lots of wives. Maybe you have a big palace. You're pretty up there. You're pretty neat, right? And the Torah is meant to be a reminder to him that he's not the be all and end all in this nation. It's supposed to be a humbling thing. So a king, the mitzvahs recognize that our egos, our worst, our Yetzer Hara gets the better of us, and all of us, but especially someone in the king's position. And therefore, carrying the Torah everywhere, or having the Torah with him everywhere, is that little reminder, hey, there is a higher judge, there's a higher king. You're not the king, you're a king, but Hashem is a little bit higher than you, and don't forget it. So it keeps him humble, and it also keeps him on the right path. As we know from history, unfortunately, a lot of Jewish kings did not follow the right path, but at least it was supposed to try to help him do that. Okay, so this applies to men and women as well. We have different opportunities to self-actualize, which means our mitzvahs are going to be different. Now, how are men's and women's different natures reflected in their mitzvahs? Okay, so if we say that men and women, go ahead.
I think that's so brilliant, actually, that a king would need to have that reminder to stay humble. I mean, it's a law, that it's so understood the human nature.
Right.
Brilliant.
Right. Right. Yeah. 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 It's absolutely. And again, then there's mitzvot specific to, let's say, judges who have the mitzvah to, let's say, for example, to teach them how to judge appropriately. For example, the mitzvah of not, taking bribes. So that's sort of an obvious one. But also to not to. It's very interesting. There's a mitzvah in the Torah that basically says judges cannot be social justice warriors. Which, what do I mean by that? Today's social justice warrior is all about the little guy. As a matter of fact, I remember when John Roberts was up for election to the Supreme Court, not election, but appointment to the Supreme Court, his hearings, one of the questions of his hearings from one of the senators was, so how are you going to be protecting the little guy? How are you going to promise to, what's your view on protecting and looking out for the little guy? Now, John Roberts answered correctly. You know what he said? What would be the correct answer to that? What do you think? What would he say his job was then? Right. He said correctly, it's not my job to protect the little guy. It's the job of a judge is to follow the law. Now, sometimes he said that's going to fall in favor of the little guy, and sometimes it's going to fall in favor of the big guy. So the Torah has the same prescription. Do not favor the poor man over the rich man. You might think it would be the opposite, and some judges might be inclined to do that too. On the other hand, the Torah recognizes there's a little bit of a social justice warrior in all of us, especially judges who feel like they have the ability to right the wrongs of society. And so the Torah says, no, don't. You need to, so there are, again.
It's violated a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now, men's way into Torah. We talked about their nature a little bit. Their way into Torah is communal groups rather than individually. Okay, their way is more public and external qualities, spirituality. So, in other words, they're more about they're bound to a specific time, right? Because they need more regimentation. Male consciousness and energies are more outwardly directed than females. We talked about this last week when we talked about how they experience the world through external truths, right? And that's what caused them to sin when the spies came back with a negative report. First, that the spies gave a negative report was proof of their believing their eyes rather than knowing the truth like the women did. But it's also the men who listened to them in the desert and said, oh, the land is full of giants. That's it. We can't conquer the land. So they're more externally based. So therefore they need more externally imposed guidance. They need more time specific mitzvahs like sukkah, shema, right, all of that. There's a large amount of regimentation. Men also identify in groups. They form groups. They form legal groups. They form sports teams. They form military units. They identify more in groups. So therefore,
more than women?
What?
More than women?
Apparently, I mean, this is the line of thinking. Okay. Let's see. Is it more than women?
I think
Let's see.
Women tend to form groups more, and men seem to be more. Do you think? Maybe it's in my world.
Well, I think maybe on a different level, like a more when men form groups, I think it's more organized and almost like what do you call it? Like something they have to do versus like, hey, let's start a book club, like or whatever, and the men would be like, why would I want to do that? You know. But like you're thinking of more like we're always trying to find ways to get together.
Want to do. Sports.
Right.
Yeah, but
I'll go with
I think men sometimes tend to be totally fine doing that on their own, where women it's all. I feel like we're more socialized overall and are always thinking of ways. Hey, maybe we could go have manicures together. Like if you're gonna have a manicure, the guy probably wants to get his hair cut or whatever.
Right. Just go and do it. Right.
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 Where we're like, hey, let's make it fun. Maybe we can. I don't know. Is that what
But
you're
I
thinking
think,
of?
but I also
Maybe.
let me just add that I think that when it comes to women forming, like when you said let's go get a manicure, the end goal is, I think, to relate to individuals
Yes.
on the individual level. In other words, the idea is not to form a group like the Boy Scouts. I mean, okay, we have the Girl Scouts, but the goal is more of an individual goal. Even though I'm forming a book club, it's whereas with men, it seems like it's not the goal wouldn't be so much individual connections to other people. You want to say something?
I'm just wondering if it's like the rationale they use for something else, that like men form groups because their nature would be to just kind of be more independent and go get what they need, do what they need. And this makes them connect, where we connect more naturally.
Mm-hmm. So Heller thinks
That they're that.
their natures are more aligned with groupthink, which is why Minyan is suited for them so much better than it would be for women. Women, and that's, let's put it this way. It's interesting because Minyan is obviously a sticking point for women, right? For Jewish women.
Right.
And the places she makes a point of saying in let's say more egalitarian communities where you have women going to Minyan and being part of the Minyan, what you find a lot is that men don't end up going because not because women have formed their group, but because they feel like it's not for them anymore. Whereas they may need that public aspect, that group aspect, but if women are taking it over, they feel it's not the place for them anymore. So I don't know. So she does believe that it's a matter of their natures.
Could it be also that it could be something they're less likely to do unless they're...
That's what Lisa was suggesting, right? That in other words, they need that push towards... Right. Okay, that's interesting. Either way, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Well, we can.
But we all agree that their things are more public and externally imposed.
The mitzvos, you mean? Yeah, absolutely. And again, we talked about the Minyan addresses this lack that they had. They used their external way of processing information and their external way towards spirituality for negative with the Minyan, with the spies. So therefore, the Minyan is the corrective to that. Whenever, if they need to get together in a group and proclaim, and praise Hashem. Okay. Right. So public prayers is men's vehicle for spiritual expression. Therefore, he's counted a Minyan. And again, why can't women join the Minyan? So first of all, you can go to shul and join and just daven with a Minyan. You're not going to be part of it because, again, if you're if you're exempt from a specific mitzvah, you can't take someone else's. You can't do the mitzvah for someone else. For example, men and women have equal level of obligation when it comes to lighting candles. I've mentioned this before. Every person has to light Shabbos candles, every adult does. So, but women do it for men in the same way that, for example, men say Kiddush for women because they have the same level of obligation. Okay, so a woman has the same level of obligation in candle lighting as men do, so therefore they can take. In the case of Minyan, because woman is not obligated to Minyan, she can't take the place of a man who is obligated. She can't do it for him.
Bar mitzvah can't make Kiddush for...
That's right. Same thing. Right. That's what it's... So it's a legal issue here. Okay, the woman, on the other hand, is more likely to feel spiritually at home in the realm of free expression. So she doesn't have the necessity to daven with a Minyan. She can do it at home. She can do it anywhere, and will reach that same... I have to just say something also regarding men and Minyan. Okay, anyway, we're going to continue.
Why, like Tehillim, which is like a woman's thing.
Yeah.
Why is there more power when you form a group?
In a group? Mm-hmm. Oh, because in general, but there, you see, women can be a group. Well, I will answer your question, but because you're saying minyan, you need a group in order to say certain prayers, and you need a group, but not all prayers, by the way. A man can daven at home if he needs to, right? But certain prayers, Kaddish has to be said with a minyan, Torah reading has to be done with a minyan. So we're not talking about just praying, we're talking about certain prayers. Okay, so you're asking about, so why is it, right, there's power in a group because we do believe that many voices have the power that one voice does not have. Not to say that one person does not reach God, the heavenly throne, but that there, of course, then it's all metaphorical because, God doesn't hear with physical ears a louder, voices in unison, but there is, again, and if we understand the purpose of prayer is for us and not God, right? So then there is strength in numbers. There is strength if I'm gathering together with a group of women to say Tehillim on behalf of a sick person or whatever it is. We're told there is a power in mutual voices davening to Hashem. And again, it's strengthening the group. Now, can women get together and daven Shacharis in the morning? Well, sure. My daughter does it every day in her school, right? The fact that she doesn't have to get together with a minyan doesn't mean that she doesn't have power. Her voice doesn't have power with a group of women. It just means that she's not obligated to get together if she wants to say those certain prayers. But yes, women can get together in groups, and they have been doing so. They do that for the purpose of Tehillim, for example, which is one of the things she talks about as a women's way of attaining spirituality. Tehillim is a great example. She says, by the way, that Tehillim is particularly suited for women because if you're busy in your day, you have, kids at your feet, you can stop saying Tehillim at the end of a line, right? Rather than, for example, Shemona Esrei, the Amidah, you have to stand with your feet together for the time that it takes you to say the entire 18 blessings. And it's not so easy, not so easily done for a mother of young children. But Tehillim, you can pick it up and put it down anytime you want. It's more flexible. So women like that, and it's just something that women have taken on over time. Okay, let's get back because I want to. You're going. You're putting on your coat because you're going.
No,
or
I'm
you're cold?
just chilling.
Okay, good. She also says, so women are more, we don't need the imposed structures. Again, it doesn't mean that we're automatically on a higher level. It means that we don't need those imposed structures in order to get to that level. That's what it means. And in addition, she says, the women's natures, we're talking about Bina, the insight that women have. The Torah exempts a lot women from these things, which would take them away from building relationships and nurturing, right? The whole concept of minyan is seeing yourself as part of a whole, but women don't have this need to be a part of a whole. They make connections on an individual level, right? They see connections on an individual level. It says in the Talmud that that women are 1,000 women does not make a tzibor. Tzibor means a public group. A tzibor means 10 men or more. So 1,000 individual women do not make a tzibor. Even if they get together as 1,000 women, they're still not going to be a tzibor. And she explains that as saying because there are 1,000 people who look at others individually, okay, and on an individual level. She says, interestingly enough, and she points out that women actually have more choice when it comes to spiritual fulfillment and self-actualization than men. She says they can give themselves over as wives and mothers and nurturers, but they don't have to. And again, this goes back to the mitzvah that men have to procreate. Women don't have that requirement. So in other words, man is more restricted in that sense. In other words, his way of, his pathway to spirituality is he's going to be a father and a husband. Right? Her pathway to spirituality means she doesn't have to be a mother to fulfill that role. Right? I mentioned to you that when Rachel Imenu, our foremother, came to Yaakov and said, I don't have any kids, daven to Hashem to help me get kids, he criticized her. He said, don't, and the rabbis understand that to mean that your role as a spiritual human being doesn't begin and end with motherhood. You have a job. You have to find a spiritually fulfilling path to God. And that doesn't necessarily mean motherhood. So they have other options if they want. Okay. So, okay. Okay. Another reason men have time-bound mitzvos, by the way, is that the purpose of time-bound mitzvos is to make us aware of the sanctity of time. Right now, women have a built-in time clock. We're much more aware of the passage of time. I mean, even just the monthly cycles help us do this, right? But then we have, if you have a child, so you're counting 9 months, and then you're constantly counting the age of children, right? 1 month there, 2 months. People go up to 24 months before they start using years,
When the date lasts.
Right, exactly, right. So we're much more aware of the passage of time and the sanctity of time. Men need those external reminders of the preciousness of time. So regarding, by the way, some interesting points here. Regarding the reasons that the sages tell us for why, I haven't touched on it, for why women are exempt from time-bound mitzvos. We talked about how we are considered, obviously, the raisers of our family. And we're talking about a spiritual sense of raising, not physical of doing the floors, right? That's really a minority opinion. It's interesting to note. Apparently, and I think Rabbi Meiselman notes this in his book. That's where I got this from. It's one commentary in the 14th century by someone by the name of Abu Draham, and he says familial responsibilities is why women were exempt. Most commentaries disagree with him and say that there's too many women. There are many women who don't have household tasks, but are also exempt. Okay, but most authorities do not offer an explanation. However, the Talmud does point out that the exemption implies nothing as to the relative spiritual worth of both men and women. There's no comparison in value that's indicated by the lesser number of mitzvos, right? A few authorities say, like the Maharal of Prague, he says that it's reflective of the greater ease with which women achieve spiritual goals. So they're not higher, but it's reflective of the fact that is easier for them to do so. That their personality is closer to the serenity necessary for spiritual achievement. So there's a positive thing there. The Talmud says also the reward promised to women is greater than that promised to men because it is assumed they will achieve higher levels than men. So we're capable of higher levels. And Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch says the Torah didn't consider these mitzvahs necessary to be demanded from women. Quote, the Torah takes it for granted that our women have greater fervor and more faithful enthusiasm for their God-serving calling, and their calling runs less danger in their case than in that of men. In other words, there's more. Our natures are more in tune with the divine, maybe is what he's saying. Again, this doesn't mean that she can't take on more mitzvahs than if she likes. And we talked about how, okay, now this gets back to your eyebrow raising at the idea of shofar and omer. So as I said, women can take on the ones that are allowed to them. There's just maybe 3 or 4 that they're not really supposed to do, tzitzis and tefillin, etc. When a mitzvah has a precedence of being taken on by large groups of women over large periods of time, it becomes obligatory, which is why you have today the second shofar blowing in Rosh Hashanah. Because at this point in our history, women have over the centuries taken it on to the point where now everybody does it. So now it has to be done. But strictly speaking, it's not a mitzvah that they were originally obligated to do. Omer is a similar thing, although much less emphasis is placed on that in terms of have to do it. So women tend to do it, and they do it in droves, which is fine. Sukkah is also like that. There's very few people. There are a few, but I mean, sometimes you'll just don't have room. My grandparents they have maybe room on their little, what is it called, merapeset, little porch for a small sukkah, only one person is allowed, has room for it, has room for them. So the man sits there. The woman doesn't have to. But today, it's basically, de rigueur that the sukkah is going to hold everybody, including the women. So when women take on more obligations, then becomes an obligatory thing. Yeah. So I think that's it. Yeah, we came to, yeah, go ahead.
So, I've seen, in some, more modern households, that there's some,